We have the watch now. Rest in peace, Officer Chhateri Elise Payne, badge 1588, code 8, forever.
Everything was He was like, but you know, she's got the gunshot wound to her head and it's fatal. It was just like my world just fell apart.
The watch is ours now. Rest well. Officer Chhateri Elise Payne, badge 1588, code 8 for eternity. In that moment, everything changed. He described the scene with cold detachment, noting the gunshot to her head was inevitably fatal. For Litha, it felt as though her entire reality had suddenly disintegrated. Shreveport police officials confirmed that Officer Chhateri Payne was executed while heading to her shift last night. Chief Ben Raymond described her as a highly respected officer who felt a profound calling to serve her community. As the forensic puzzle begins to take shape, investigators are looking for a motive. Chief Raymond issued a chilling ultimatum to the individual responsible for this calculated and heinous act. That evening, Chhateri donned her uniform and stepped out of the Midway Avenue home she shared with Trayvon and their daughter. She was duty-ready, her badge polished and uniform crisp, expecting a routine night on patrol. The killers were already there, lurking in the shadows and waiting for her approach. Minutes before the gunfire, Trayvon sent his cousin, Lawrence Pierre, a one-word signal, outside. The trap was set. That single word was the catalyst. Chhateri stepped out into an ambush she never could have anticipated. Struck by multiple rounds to the lung and head, she fell as Trayvon dialed 911, playing the grieving boyfriend. By the time the first patrol units arrived, his alibi was already perfectly crafted for the responding officers. He claimed he was inside with their daughter until shots rang out, then fired at a mysterious figure in black. He dismissed it as a random tragedy, feigning ignorance. But even the best rehearsed scripts have a breaking point. On the surface, his narrative seemed airtight, holding together just long enough to distract from the truth. Every detail had a calculated answer, and every investigative query was met with a prompt, prepared response. Yet, something felt wrong. Over 50 units and 10 Caddo Parish deputies descended upon the Midway Avenue scene. The mayor and police chief arrived personally. The slaying of an officer is an assault on the entire city. This was no routine call. The impact rippled through Shreveport, leaving a profound and icy silence in its wake. Chhateri was rushed to the hospital, leaving her family clinging to a single, fragile thread of hope. A surgeon initially told Litha the lung injury was treatable, sparking a momentary, agonizing flicker of optimism. She held on to that hope with everything she had, until the doctor revealed the head wound was unsurvivable. Litha's world dissolved in that sterile hospital corridor, a moment of trauma she describes with haunting, vivid clarity. She still recalls the scent, perfume and hair products clashing with the heavy, metallic tang of fresh blood. She can still visualize the medical equipment, the chest tubes, and the horrific reality of the gunshot wounds. She remembers the entry wounds and the frantic, failing rhythm of her daughter's vitals on the hospital monitors. Every beep of those machines and every flickering line on the screen remains burned into her memory. January 9th, 2019, remains etched in Litha Nash Hudson's mind as the day she lost her soulmate. Though society often separates parent and child, they were inseparable, a duo they called Mama G and Chug. Litha used various nicknames, like Moosey Bowie for her daughter, whom she admitted was lovingly spoiled. Long before the badge, Chhateri Payne was a soul of the arts, acting, singing, and crafting original poetry. Her true ambition lay in entertainment law. Few knew she dreamt of representing artists in the courtroom. She felt a pull toward legal advocacy, making her sudden pivot to law enforcement a complete revelation to her family. She simply announced one day that she had applied to the academy and was taking the civil service exam. The news left Litha completely stunned. Soon, she was deep in training for the Shreveport force, maintaining constant contact with her mother throughout. They spoke daily about the grueling physical and mental demands of the academy and the struggles she faced. After graduation, they made a solemn vow. A call or text after every single roll call was mandatory. Litha needed to know exactly which sector her daughter was patrolling every single night for her own peace. Every break and shift end required a check-in, a ritual they kept until that final, fateful evening. Litha reached for her phone to dial her daughter's number, but hesitated for just one critical second. She decided to call her husband, Terrell, first to share a brief update, hanging up to dial his number. She had finished her rounds and administered medication when a call arrived from her daughter's ex, the primary person of interest. That ring triggered immediate suspicion. His motives for reaching out were entirely unclear. The voice on the other end delivered the unthinkable news. Her daughter had been shot. Her instinct was instantaneous. He had murdered her child. After relaying the tragedy to her husband, she sped toward the emergency room. Medical staff emerged, balancing thin hope against a devastating reality. They initially claimed a chest wound was survivable through surgical intervention. A fleeting moment of optimism surfaced before the surgeon's tone darkened significantly. The physician's tone shifted. A second gunshot to the head was deemed non-survivable. In that instant, her entire reality fractured beyond repair. The memory remains tied to a specific, haunting olfactory imprint. The scent of luxury perfume collided with the grim reality of trauma. Gucci Premier blended with the unmistakable, metallic tang of fresh blood. She preserves her stained uniform, a physical link to that final night. Relinquishing the garment would mean losing the last traces of her daughter. She begged hospital staff to ensure her child never faced the end alone. Instead, she is haunted by images of her daughter dying in isolation. She pondered her daughter's final thoughts. Insomnia is fueled by the crushing guilt of her own absence. She remains paralyzed by her inability to prevent the inevitable. She had pleaded with her daughter to return to the safety of home. The warnings were clear. Return until their living arrangements were settled. She begged her to return. The officer dismissed the perceived threat. The watch concludes for Officer Chhateri, Elise Payne, badge 1588. 10 days later, they buried her, leaving Litha to navigate the wreckage. Nights are spent scouring messages, a ritual born of persistent insomnia. Every letter and digital tribute became a lifeline in her grief. Among the tributes was a collection of handmade cards from a stranger. Her home became a sanctuary filled with tokens from across the nation. There was a cold comfort in seeing her daughter's character validated by others. This collective mourning provided a fragile sense of peace. 12 months have passed, yet the weight of their codependency lingers. They shared a bond so intense it bordered on the pathological. She recalls her daughter's haunting inquiry about a world without her. The answer remains unchanged. She is barely surviving the loss. Now, her granddaughter Aubrey serves as her only reason to continue. She still speaks to her daughter's memory about the exhaustion of parenting. She orders her to come get her child. These phantom conversations are all that remain of their relationship. Together, they pore over old photographs, keeping the memory alive. The mother expresses profound debt to the residents of the Arlitex region. Community funds established a permanent memorial at Forest West Park Cemetery. She keeps the blood-soaked trousers, unable to discard the final physical evidence of her daughter. That evening, at 10:17, 22-year-old Officer Chhateri Elise Payne was declared dead, having served on the force for under 2 months. Detectives refused to accept Trayvon's account. When the facts fail to align, investigators dig deeper. A search warrant for his phone revealed data inconsistent with a grieving partner. Before that night, Trayvon's browser history displayed a series of disturbing, targeted inquiries. He scrutinized whether life insurance policies remained valid following gunshot wounds. He researched survival rates of limb shots and the lethality of leg wounds. These were tactical simulations, not idle curiosities. It was a calculated assessment of risk and mechanical execution. This was the work of a man anticipating violence. Then, the digital trail deepened through his communications. Records showed Trayvon maintained constant contact with his cousin, Lawrence Pierre, starting the previous evening. Their exchanges were not familial small talk. Pierre was surveilling Chhateri, documenting her movements and departure times. Trayvon monitored Pierre's proximity to the residence throughout the evening. They synchronized their movements. A single, cryptic signal was sent outside, followed 2 minutes later by gunfire. Authorities concluded that Trayvon's involvement was part of a larger, coordinated effort. Pierre was physically present, while Glenn Frierson was identified as the suspected getaway driver who transported him to Midway Avenue. Forensic evidence confirmed Pierre's presence, and the murder weapon was eventually located. Although Trayvon's fingerprints were absent from the firearm, the legal implications of conspiracy remained absolute. The trio planned and executed the hit in unison, and they would face the consequences as one. The motive appeared to be Chhateri's decision to finally end the relationship. Her departure was finalized, the deposit was paid, and moving day was 6 days away. He found that reality intolerable. 1 week after the murder, a multi-agency task force led by the Shreveport Police Department took action. The Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office and Bossier Parish Sheriff's Office joined the operation. Support was also provided by the Louisiana State Police and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. 3 suspects were apprehended as city leadership and police officials gathered to address the community during this dark hour. On January 9, 2019, at roughly 8:20 p.m., units were dispatched to the 1600 block of Midway Avenue following reports of a shooting victim at a private residence. First responders arrived shortly after to find Officer Chhateri Payne in her uniform, critically wounded. She had sustained severe injuries and was in a desperate struggle for survival. Emergency medical teams transported her to Ochsner Health Center to address her catastrophic wounds. Medical staff were unable to save her, and Officer Payne passed away shortly after arrival. The loss of any individual is a tragedy that our community cannot tolerate. Yet, when an officer dedicated to public safety is murdered, the entire city feels a profound, shared grief. It is often noted that when a law enforcement official falls, it is not merely a department that suffers. The impact is felt nationwide. Today, while many details remain obscured, we stand here in solemn reflection. Our investigative teams are among the most skilled professionals in the field of violent crime. They are currently working around the clock to uncover the truth behind this tragedy. We are maintaining an open perspective as this inquiry remains in its preliminary phase. No lead will go unexamined until those responsible for this heinous act are brought to justice. A coalition of various public safety organizations is supporting our ongoing efforts. Our teams have labored through the night and will continue until the perpetrators are held accountable. Hired on July 27, 2018, Chhateri Payne began her journey as part of Academy Class 79. Admired by her peers, it was clear she possessed a genuine devotion to public service. On November 16, 2018, she successfully completed her training. The chief recalled the pride in her eyes as she accepted her diploma and officially joined the ranks. Her passion for her chosen path was unmistakable as she embarked on her career in public service. Payne viewed her role as a spiritual summons, a duty she formalized by swearing to protect the people of Shreveport. The homicide of a fellow officer creates a deep, agonizing rift within the department, leaving a permanent mark of tragedy. Nevertheless, the administration emphasized that their resolve remains unshaken and their investigative focus stays sharp. The department pledged to honor its debt to the public and to the brave souls wearing the uniform daily. Essential police operations will persist alongside the community's grief over the senseless execution of Officer Payne. Authorities are mobilizing every possible asset to hunt down those responsible and ensure they face the full weight of justice. The police requested that anyone holding clandestine details regarding this violent act come forward immediately. Witnesses should contact the Crime Stoppers hotline at 6737-C7373. Alternatively, tips can be submitted through the anonymous portal at www.lockup.org. The department extended a blanket of support to Payne's grieving family, promising them a permanent place within the force. Standing with Mayor Perkins after an exhaustive night, the chief opened the floor to the pressing questions of the media. A reporter inquired about the officer's 2-year-old toddler and whether the child had been forced to witness the slaying. Investigators confirmed finding a young child at the residence during the initial sweep of the crime scene. It remains unclear what the child observed, or if the violence was the result of a domestic escalation. A massive task force from the police, fire, and neighboring units is currently dissecting the scene for forensic evidence. Consequently, it is premature to determine the motive, though the search for a suspect description continues with high intensity. While some preliminary suspect data has surfaced, detectives are hesitant to release details without further corroboration. The department remains desperate for any external leads that could potentially crack the case wide open. Questions arose regarding a person of interest detained earlier, leading to inquiries about their current status. A witness was indeed interviewed on site, but that individual has since been released from police custody. No other suspects have been apprehended yet, and officials are calling for public assistance in identifying potential leads. The chief maintained that solid suspect profiles would only be shared once they reached a high level of certainty. Currently, the fragmented nature of the incoming intelligence prevents a confident public identification. Reports indicated she was gearing up for her watch. Inquiries focused on whether she was in her formal blues. She was fully outfitted in her patrol uniform, mentally and physically prepared to start her nightly shift. The ambush occurred outside. Investigators are still verifying if the location was Payne's own residence or a different property. While suspect details remain vague, the press pushed for a deeper look into the victim's personal background. Many of her academy peers kept a somber vigil at the hospital, struggling to process the loss of their friend. Though her tenure was brief, she left an impression of high-level professionalism and dedication. Regarded as sharp and physically capable, her classmates remembered her as someone destined for the badge. She was a dedicated public servant whose absence has left an irreparable void within the precinct. Navigating the aftermath of such a targeted killing will prove to be a significant challenge for the department. Rumors of multiple shots, specifically targeting the head, began to circulate through the local news channels. Authorities confirmed multiple wounds were sustained, but the exact points of impact remain classified. There were also mentions of her past as a prominent track athlete during her years at Captain Shreve. Nothing confirmed. Public information officers plan to provide regular dispatches as new developments in the case are solidified. Should a definitive suspect be identified, the department will immediately solicit the community's help for an arrest. There is no evidence suggesting the officer was able to draw or fire her service weapon. The forensic complexity of the scene makes it difficult to draw immediate conclusions about the physical evidence. The department was forced to juggle two separate shooting investigations that unfolded simultaneously that evening. The media questioned if this dual crisis hampered the initial response to Payne's murder. Officials insisted the investigation remain prioritized, bolstered by an exceptional surge of support from the community. Local, state, and federal law enforcement entities immediately established contact with the administration. These agencies pledged their entire strength, from state troopers to federal agents, to the local cause. A massive influx of manpower was mobilized to meticulously process the crime scene throughout the night. This surge in personnel allowed investigators to simultaneously manage other escalating events across the city. Reporters pressed for a definitive statement directed toward the unidentified individual responsible for the violence. The pursuit would be relentless, utilizing every available forensic and tactical asset until a resolution was achieved. When questioned about external reinforcements, the administration confirmed an overwhelming wave of collaborative assistance. A vast network of partners had joined the investigation, their numbers too extensive to list individually. Every single precinct across the Northwest Louisiana corridor had mobilized to support the local force. Confronted with specific details for confirmation, the official remained silent, citing the sensitive nature of the case. The mayor's office faced intense scrutiny regarding the city's turbulent start and the rising tide of instability. Observers questioned the ultimate objective as the city navigated the shadow of this latest tragedy. New mandates and shifted departmental strategies were already being implemented to overhaul local policing efforts. Beyond policy, there was a call for a profound spiritual and psychological examination of the community's soul. The goal was to uncover the dark, underlying roots of the criminal pathology suffering the region. A recurring theme in the administration's philosophy is the impossibility of mandating morality through legislation. While the policing front remained active, the community was urged to find internal solutions to the crisis. Chief Raymond spearheaded a daily operation to track the perpetrators and ensure they faced the scales of justice. One reporter asked for a personal reflection on the haunting atmosphere at the crime scene that evening. Drawing on a history of military service, the speaker possessed a seasoned perspective on high-stakes tragedy. Despite a career defined by conflict, the weight of this particular loss proved uniquely devastating. A profound sense of grief was etched onto the faces of every officer patrolling the cordoned site. The trauma extended to the fire department and other emergency responders who witnessed the grim aftermath. Chief Raymond's sentiment echoed through the briefing. The void left by a fallen officer is permanent. Known for an impeccable reputation, the fallen officer's absence cast a long, somber shadow over her colleagues. The loss was described as a monumental blow to the heart of the Shreveport Police Department. Concerns were raised regarding the psychological impact on the younger, less experienced members of the force. Leadership sought to reassure the officers, reminding them of the fundamental purpose behind their dangerous calling. The tragedy served as a grim reminder of the predators roaming the world and the necessity of the shield. The official paused, allowing the gravity of the situation to resonate through the room. There was hope that this period of mourning would fuel a more fierce dedication to Shreveport's safety. The inquiry turned toward what direct message of reassurance could be offered to the shaken public. The administration doubled down on their previous stance, calling for a unified front against the violence. Reform alone was deemed insufficient. The city needed to address the deep-seated rot within its own neighborhoods. In this period of collective sorrow, the plea for communal solidarity became a central theme of the briefing. Thoughts were directed toward Officer Payne's family as the community struggled to find a path forward. This was framed not as a failure of bureaucracy, but as a systemic crisis for every resident. Shreveport's future would be defined by whether the community could mend its broken pieces in unison. Questions arose regarding the logistical strain on the force and the possibility of mandatory overtime shifts. The mayor deferred the technicalities of tactical deployment to Chief Raymond's specific operational expertise. Reporters questioned if the mayor intended to maintain such a visible presence at future crime scenes. A pledge was made. Whenever tragedy struck, the executive would be standing on the front lines. A formal protocol had been established on the 29th to ensure administrative support during violent escalations. Unless away on official city business, the mayor committed to witnessing the aftermath of every major crime. The dialogue shifted toward the long-standing debate over competitive compensation for those in the line of fire. The administration faced inquiries regarding a revised salary structure designed to prevent the exodus of local law enforcement. He immediately acknowledged the validity of the inquiry. Standing with his colleagues, he noted Councilman Grayson Busher had introduced the issue at the most recent session. A rigorous audit of the municipal budget was underway to ensure competitive wages and bolster officer retention. He continued, "Such tragedies served as a grim reminder of the profound risks taken by those serving the citizens of Shreveport." As logistics were finalized, the officers' remains reached the mortuary, with family consultations scheduled for later that afternoon. Investigators allowed the grieving family a necessary period of seclusion. Senior leadership remained in contact with the relatives, pledging an unwavering commitment to their welfare during the ordeal. The department prepared for a funeral service conducted with the highest tier of law enforcement honors. Such measures remained contingent solely upon the family's final consent. The briefing concluded with an acknowledgement of the arduous investigative work still looming ahead. Authorities promised transparent updates as the fluid situation continued to evolve. The final question was posed to the podium. Is the suspect still at large and considered armed and dangerous? Lacking a definitive identity, police proceeded under the chilling assumption that the killers remained at large and heavily armed. A relentless, high-intensity pursuit was mobilized to bring a definitive end to the manhunt. He finished. The investigation centered on 26-year-old Trayvon Anderson and his 22-year-old cousin, Lawrence Pierre. At the time of the shooting, Pierre held a position as a deputy clerk within the Caddo Juvenile Court. A barber named Glenn Ferson was also charged with second-degree murder, along with the others. A haunting question lingered over Shreveport. The crime was meticulously recorded, yet the classification remained puzzling. Digital footprints revealed a dark trail of coordinated messages, calculated search histories, and incriminating cellular pings. The decision to forego first-degree charges hinged entirely on the prosecution's theory of the killer's psychological drive. Prosecutors argued the primary objective was not the badge, but a woman who had reclaimed her autonomy. To the killer, her uniform was incidental. It was merely the attire she wore while attempting to escape him. The violence was triggered by an apartment deposit, a tangible sign that her plan to leave was finally real. This was not an assault on the state, but a lethal strike against a woman he refused to release. The district attorney framed the case as a fatal reaction to a domestic abuser's loss of absolute control. Legally, the second-degree charge secured the same terminal outcome, a life spent behind bars without reprieve. Yet, many observers remained unsatisfied with that legal interpretation. Critics pointed to the predatory level of surveillance as evidence of a much more calculated execution. To many, the data recovered from the devices whispered of a crime far more premeditated than the charges suggested. The controversy persisted until the trial began in April 2022. After a last-minute plea, Pierre was called to the stand to implicate his alleged co-conspirators. He remained stone-faced and silent, invoking his right to withhold any testimony throughout the entire examination. Jurors were instead shown his taped confession. It took only 2 hours for them to reach a verdict. Trayvon Anderson was found guilty of second-degree murder and the cold conspiracy to carry it out. Glenn Ferson walked free as the jury found the evidence insufficient to link him to the murderous plot. Judge John D. Mosley Jr. handed down a sentence of life imprisonment without any hope of future release. He added a 30-year maximum sentence for the conspiracy conviction. The terms were set to run consecutively. Before the gavel fell, Litha rose to address her daughter's killer. She spoke of a shattered family, distinguishing between the public's Officer Payne and her own beloved daughter. The grief felt senseless. The mother described a crushing habit of reaching for a phone that never rings. Her daily ritual of calling a ghost left the courtroom in a heavy, haunting silence. The city of Shreveport mobilized for the fallen officer. Rows of mourners, many of whom were strangers to her, waited hours to offer a final salute. The assembly convened to honor the legacy of Elise, the woman the community knew simply as Litha Nash. Her story began on June 30th, 1996. It reached a violent end on January 9th, 2019. Scriptural promises filled the room. The chaplain spoke of faith transcending mortality, suggesting that even in death, the spirit remains unyielding. On Saturday, January 19th, 2019, the Summer Grove Baptist Church became a sanctuary for the grieving. They gathered to mark her final transition from this world. Pastor Ulysses Reed led the proceedings, driven by a singular, somber purpose. Every word spoken aimed to honor a higher power while anchoring the shattered family in spiritual support. The divine was framed as their only sanctuary from the cold reality of loss. Strength was sought from above as the structured ritual of the memorial service began to unfold. Any deviations from the scheduled eulogy would be announced directly from the sanctuary's podium. Following the opening, Reed prepared to recite selected passages from both biblical testaments. He invoked the 23rd Psalm, painting an image of a divine protector guiding a weary soul toward peace. The verses spoke of tranquil waters and the restoration of a fractured spirit through a righteous path. Even when traversing the darkest corridors of mortality, the ancient text promised a shield against the encroaching darkness. It described a defiant grace in the face of adversaries, an abundance of spirit that could not be drained. The passage concluded with a pledge of eternal safety within a celestial residence. That concluded the reading of the 23rd Psalm from the ancient scriptures. Turning to the Gospel of John, chapter 14, the minister urged the congregation to find stillness in their grief. He spoke of vast dwellings in the afterlife, a promise meant to soothe the minds of those left behind. The scripture detailed a homecoming, a return to a space meticulously prepared for the departed. It suggested that the path to this final destination was already etched in their consciousness. When doubt was voiced regarding the destination, the response was a claim of absolute truth and direction. Only through this singular path could one reach the source, ending the selection from the 14th chapter of John. The hope was that these sacred words might provide a psychological anchor for the grieving relatives. The minister then called for a collective moment of silent invocation. He acknowledged the inherent human struggle to make sense of such a senseless tragedy. Despite the lack of logical explanation, the congregation leaned into their collective conviction. Gratitude was expressed for the perceived presence of the divine and the strength of the Trinity, and for the guiding influence of the Holy Spirit. A plea for absolution was whispered amidst the heavy silence of the church. They attempted to find grace even while drowning in a sea of visceral agony and sorrow. The community reflected on the service and the lasting impact left by Officer Payne. Spiritual intervention was requested for the mother and the young daughter she left behind. The prayer extended to her siblings, asking for a mental fortitude that surpassed their current despair. A grueling journey of mourning stretched out before the survivors. They clung to the hope that a higher constancy would carry them through the coming storms. The congregation sought divine endurance for Pastor Reed as he stood to deliver his final address. The request was for the speaker to be a mere vessel for a message larger than his own grief. Petitions were made for the leadership and the neighboring communities of Shreveport and Bossier City. A specialized plea was offered for every law enforcement agent who faces the unknown behind a badge. They asked for a supernatural guard to watch over those patrolling the thin blue line. The prayer concluded with an affirmation of a reciprocal, foundational devotion. They looked toward a future dawn where the darkness of this case might finally dissipate, a sanctuary filled with a desperate plea for divine mercy. The service concluded in the name of the Christ. Finality. Her raw spirit made her presence undeniable. Ruzi. Payne possessed a magnetic pull few could ignore. Her career began at her November Academy graduation. Strangers noted the purpose in her radiant smile. It was the look of one finding their path. An encounter later revealed her deep athletic soul. Competition was etched into her very DNA. She spoke of track legacies, leaving a playful impression. Her final parting sentiment proved the most haunting. She confessed a simple, profound love for the badge. Those brief moments are preserved in tragic amber. On January 9th, Shreveport lost a vital light. The city's grief is a shadow to Aubrey's void. A motherless 2-year-old child woke to reality. Senseless violence stole her life away. The city stood in vigil with her family. A heavy pain rippled through the department. Brotherhood provided the only available comfort. The community sought to honor her through service. They prayed her sacrifice was not in vain. A demand echoed to end the local bloodshed. The mayor delivered the city's final official tribute. Born in 1996, she joined in 2018. She served as a faithful shield for citizens. She graduated with Class 79 in November 2018. Colleagues remembered her as a steadfast ally. She stood proudly among the city's uniformed brave. A heart for service defined her brief vocation. Her honorable example of courage is etched here. Prayers were offered for her remarkable spirit. Therefore, Mayor Perkins officially proclaimed a day of tribute. Citizens were urged to mirror her quiet hope. The official seal was affixed to her legacy: gratitude. The chief offered condolences to the assembly. They gathered to honor a life taken abruptly. No phone call is more chilling than this. Mortality is rarely discussed by those in uniform. They are trained for others' tragedies, not theirs. They overlook their vulnerability to the surrounding evil. Payne is gone, leaving questions with no answers. The speaker refused to let the narrative center solely on her demise. Instead, the focus shifted to the brief, divine window of her life. Many attendees possessed deeper ties, yet his perspective remained clinical. Payne followed a spiritual mandate to serve the local citizenry. She wore the silver shield with a quiet, fierce pride. Her service belonged to the Shreveport Police Department's legacy. A training memo noted her impact was too significant to ignore. A selection of those observations was shared that morning. The file highlighted her rapid mastery of the police craft. Her documentation was perfect, showing the poise of a seasoned veteran. Traffic stops were executed with a veteran's cold, practiced precision. She possessed a haunting energy and a depth of empathy. The final assessment was simple. She was deeply respected and missed. Her mother, Litha, stood anchored by a wall of family support. Despite the psychological trauma, her internal resolve remained unbroken. Her husband and daughter, Aubrey, formed her primary legacy. A rare moment of levity broke the tension last Thursday. They recalled a story Payne shared regarding her field training. To protect those present, the names remained strictly redacted. The identities of the officers involved were kept confidential. She joked about silencing a talkative mentor after her rotation cycle. These recollections would eventually serve as the family's psychological armor. Young Aubrey remained a living testament to her mother's beauty. Her character evidenced her parents' deep, hands-on devotion. For the department, losing an officer is a permanent scar. No eulogy could diminish the cold ache of her loss. The investigation provided no answers for such a sudden end. The officers were reminded of their solemn, binding oath. They swore to maintain a stoic calm amidst lethal danger. Self-restraint and public welfare remained their only directives. The agency pledged to protect the Payne family indefinitely. Litha was told her family had now expanded significantly. The department had become her new, permanent kin. Searing intensity. Divinity became the center of their entire universe. He represented their joy and their only hope. Their hope, their foundation, the deity was everything. The chanting persisted. This spiritual hope was their only bridge to tomorrow. Their anchor, their rock. The divine affirmation echoed. A divine focus persists. Total devotion. An absolute focus, a singular purpose. A deep commitment, a desperate spiritual confirmation. Affirmative. A complete sanctuary. Within the quiet chamber, is the courtroom observing this? A total spiritual surrender. A persistent, rhythmic dedication. Reaffirming that sacred connection repeatedly, the deity remains the ultimate authority. Faith defines her entire reality. Communal solidarity is essential. Support for the ranks is mandatory. Crowds of mourners stood along the pavement to honor the fallen officer, Chhateri Payne. Witnessing the community unite for the grieving family is deeply moving. That 3-mile motorcade served as a parting salute to the Shreveport streets she once patrolled. It demonstrates a profound public empathy. Friends and family remain steadfast, regardless of the tragedy. Shreveport possesses a unique quality. Residents coalesce instantly when a neighbor is lost. People from across the region arrive to offer their collective sympathy to the family, offering their final silent tributes. One hopes the violence ceases. Her colleagues provided a ceremonial burial with full honors. A lasting monument was erected, funded entirely by local charitable contributions. The site features her likeness in uniform and a quiet space for reflection. Every January 9th, the police department and citizens congregate at that memorial site. Little Aubrey was only 2 when her mother, a 54-day veteran, was killed. She had secured her residence and paid the fees. 6 days remained. Litha frequently questions the heavens about her daughter's return, yet she knows no such miracle exists. The investigation revealed a haunting legacy. The patterns of coercion were unmistakable. His pattern involved forced seclusion and resentment toward her newfound independence and professional growth. These red flags were apparent to witnesses. Such behaviors are visible to the trained eye. Payne understood the necessity of her departure. Freedom was imminent. Chhateri Elise Payne, Shield 1588. The watch continues without her. Sleep well, Officer Chhateri Elise Payne, Shield 1588, forever off duty. She had earned the right to every moment of that week. Circulate this account with others. Recognizing these behavioral cycles can prevent future tragedies. Vigilance saves lives from hidden threats. Until the next case files, the story of Officer Chhateri Elise Payne is more than a tragedy. It is a profound lesson in the hidden battles fought behind closed doors. Chhateri was a daughter of the arts who answered a higher calling to protect her community. She wore her badge with fierce pride, yet while she stood as a shield for others, a lethal shadow was lurking in her own life, the shadow of domestic control. Her legacy teaches us that even our heroes are vulnerable when love turns into a prison. Chhateri was choosing her freedom. She had paid her deposit, packed her boxes, and reclaimed her autonomy. But for an abuser, a woman's independence is often the ultimate trigger. The value of this story lies in vigilance. We must learn to recognize the red flags that preceded the gunfire, the obsessive surveillance, the forced isolation, and the resentment of a partner's professional growth. Let us honor Officer Payne by refusing to look away. True bravery isn't just wearing a uniform. It's having the courage to speak up when we see the signs of coercion. We must build a world where choosing to leave doesn't require a sacrifice of life. No one, not even a hero, should ever have to face the darkness alone.